one of the toughest things for many humans to do is to be. We believe that if we're not doing, we are not really existing. Because we know that we live in motion. Everything is always changing, growing, expanding, or contracting. There's no stillness. And so when someone uses the word being, it makes one think that we are just simply unplugging from the world around us, that we are being still, that we are doing nothing. And there is some truth to this. There is a sense of nothingness that is essential to simply being. But being is not a rejection of life. It is not a rejection of action. What it is really the opportunity for us to see the power in the being and how much is happening while we are being. But see, the biggest problem of why we don't want to be and why most of us cannot be is because when we are being, we are truly faced with ourselves, a part of ourselves. And that part of ourself is not really the pure self and the higher self, that self that is connected to the greater universe, that is all creator, that is non-judgmental, that is the force that creates all life. What it is when we are being is that we fear actually allowing this other side of us to come forth, which is the side of us that was the program side of us. And so as we just try to be, we feel a rush, and it is the rush of the ego coming forth and saying, hey, what are you doing? It's just like kicking us and saying, move, get moving, take some action, do something. And so, sort of intimidated by the ego, you say, okay, you're right. Let me just go and do something. So you begin to move around life and you do things. And these things don't necessarily have a rhyme or reason, or don't necessarily have a greater inspiration to them. You're just simply doing them unconsciously. Though in the moment you think you're being very conscious, really they're coming unconsciously, because they're not coming from your true self. They're coming from the programmed self. See, many of us, if you were like me and you experienced extreme trauma when you were young, it can be very difficult as you go through life, even though you might have a great desire to want to experience the best of life, but you find yourself over and over doing exactly the opposite of that. And sometimes you just want to throw up your hands in the air and give up, and you want to unplug and leave the physical life because you simply cannot handle it, because you feel that you've tried so hard and you work so hard day to day, but the world around you is not responding to you in the way you want it to. And so as this begins, you really feel lost, completely lost. And in a way you are lost because you have traveled so far away from the pure self, the part of you that is simply being. And again, it is very tough to be, because when we are being, we think that we are doing nothing. And if we are doing nothing, then we're not really participating in life. And if we're not participating in life and accomplishing our goals, we're not being a good citizen, and so on and so forth. And you know where that leads, which is why as adults, we work so hard to act like adults and be serious and be these productive beings. But you've tried to work hard. See, one thing that happens, you look around you and you see some others who tell you to work hard, and the word is to hustle, and so you do that. But you notice the results you get are different from theirs. It's very frustrating. And then again, as I mentioned, the cycle begins and you find yourself completely frustrated, and in extreme cases with deep depression and anxiety and unable to really move forward. So you begin to just be. And then again, as you be, this side of you comes on and it reminds you that you are just being, so there's something wrong there. So as you can tell, the cycle is quite vicious, and it actually creates more and more those downward spirals. So how do we begin to actually change the trajectory of the spirals? Well, first of all, we cannot simply just change it. We cannot just abruptly now, from going all the way down, start going quickly up. There must be a stop, a sort of where you hit the brakes and you say enough. For some people, unfortunately, this enough is the moment where they decide to really give up on the physical life. They say, I can't handle it anymore. So they begin by making a plan in their mind about how to leave the physical world. And in some cases they do it. And in some other cases, depending on the anger and rage within them, they might direct it in the world outwards. And so that's when you see a lot of this destruction created by people in the outer world. And so let's say you decide that maybe you understand that there is value to your life, which there is. So you want to make your way back, so to speak. And making your way back is like making your way forward. Because, see, most of us people, we understand time and space in this very linear level. We say, well, I used to be in the past, and now I'm in the present, and then there's the future. That is true, but we are at all these points at the same time. This can be a bit baffling, so we'll keep it very simple. And so let's say that you are here in the present and you want to change the future, but in a way there's a going back. And what the going back to is going back to the pure self, the self that you were completely plugged into as you decided to come into the world. And so the moment that you exit your mother womb, you experience the first separation, and the separation continues. And in some cases, the separation is also a separation from the true self, the pure self, and the soul that is plugged into source, that is living in this sort of joyful, beautiful place. And so the further you unplug, the further you walk away. And so firstly, you must stop wherever you are going. And this stopping does not mean stopping and ending life. It means stopping and allowing all these forces that sort of programmed you in all your past to just be there, and to see them clearly, and to say, okay, I see you ego, I see you reactions, and I see you unconscious. And even though I might not be able to see everything, when I embody this power, the power of the light and the pure self, you are truly armored with everything that you need. But see, most do not decide to even come to this place of stillness and being, sort of stopping to connect to the higher self, because they are afraid that they will not have the tools necessary to actually get there. We do. That is why we are spirit beings. That is our greatest source of life, is this light within us. And so as we stop and we see this programming, which is a series of very dark and negative events that put us in a very reactive state, from there on, we can begin to slowly accept the process. The process, again, is not an easy and simple one, but it must first begin from a place of observing everything that is happening within you. Now, sometimes we start this process and we might go to psychiatrists or psychologists, where we're sort of observing all the inner neurosis that we built. Unfortunately, a lot of these systems are built up to still keep you wrapped up in your mind and in this cycle of neurosis. And so you keep repeating the loop. What's important to realize is that the loop, as I said, there's a spiral going downwards, which is unfortunately one of the main spirals that a lot of people have especially experienced abuse and trauma go through. But as you begin to sort of stop in this moment, you must still this part of you that has an awareness of everything that is happening. But in some cases, depending on how much trauma and neurosis that is within you, it's like standing still in the middle of a storm, in the middle of a hurricane. It's very, very tough when the winds are going really fast and you've got big waves coming to you. Except that instead of this, a broken little human, you are actually an incredible, powerful being. Except that the power that you need to withstand a storm to pass until you find your way back to your true self, to this pure self, is a power that has been sort of in a way diminished out of you, drained out of you, so you are afraid to even get there. So instead you just keep moving with the storm, and as you move with the storm, you destroy things and relationships and opportunities around in your life. So I ask to first begin with the stillness. Begin to first observe that there is a storm around and within you, but you are not the storm. It is easier said than done, and this practice must be done on a daily basis. If you can do it more than once, this is essential. If you can do it as much as you can throughout the day, this is very powerful. Unfortunately, this is very difficult because when you are in this place, you are, again, very reactive. The smallest thing around you is riling up your emotions and your reactive self. And you think you are being conscious, so consciously you say, well, that person did it and that person did it. When instead, It is your participation in that. So as you begin this process in the stillness, you must first realize that you do have the power to withstand the storms. However, you must realize that as you find the stillness, you are actually finding movement. But the movement is not towards the neurotic sort of downward spirals that you're used to. It is a movement towards the pure self. But as we understand that the ego is such a powerful force that wants to preserve our survival, it measures our survival by how we were programmed in the past. So it says, well, that's what we used to do, so we should just keep doing that. So the temptation will be to sort of fall back into your old behaviors, into your old reactions, into your becoming the storm that destroys instead of being still and observing the storm as it passes. And so to keep this message simple, I just want to say that the first step, which is what I want to share with you today, is to get to this place of stillness and observance. This is quite important, because becoming the storm that destroys is exactly what's been keeping you from finding the grounding force both into the earth and into your higher self that truly gives you that power, right? Because as you see, there is this, what we call grounding. Sometimes we think grounding in terms of the earth, correct? Because you say, well, it is the ground because, as we are on earth, there is a gravitation. So the gravitation makes it possible for us to stay grounded to the earth. However, as spirit beings, we have a relationship with the greater source, the greater universe. And when we realize this, it's quite liberating and empowering, because there is so much power in understanding that we're not just earth beings, that we are very grounded to earth, that part of our grounding comes to this pure self. So as we begin to become still, we're not just grounded to the earth, we are beginning to not make a connection to this higher self. And why it's so important to do this is because sometimes we want to jump from here to there. We say, well, I all of a sudden want to get from this downward spiral to an upward spiral, and what we call like wishful thinking in a way, right? Because there's a process to everything, just like nature, just like a tree. Have you ever planted a tree? This is one of my favorite things to do, is planting a tree, right? It starts very small, there are no fruit on it, and it doesn't happen overnight. You first must get the soil ready, you must plant the tree or the seed, and then you must, if you don't already have the tools to really figure out how much food and what kind of watering you must be doing with different plants, because different plants are different, then you begin doing this by, in a way, trial and error, which is how most of us go through our process of healing. Fortunately, though, there's tools, and this is one of the things that I'm sharing with you now, is the beginning tool, which is you must first get the soil ready before you even plant the seed. Now, in a way, you do have the seed with you. You want to grow maybe a pomegranate tree, or a beautiful garden filled with berries or jasmines or citrus plants. Pick a tree. Maybe you want to plant a fig tree. Now, fig, they take a long time. Same thing with grapes. And so you first must get your soil ready. But here's the difference. Some might tell you that the soil has to be like this for something to grow in it. But you have to understand that things even grow in the desert. So first is to understand what kind of soil you have. What is your soil like? See, oftentimes when we are so caught up in the storm, we are not paying attention to the soil that we have as people. It does not matter if your soil is sandy, or if your soil is the desert, or if your soil is a very lush tropical or Mediterranean and more dry. It does not really matter. What does matter, though, is to begin paying attention to the soil that you have. The ego wants to keep you into the storm, reacting all the time. But as you begin this stillness and this being, you begin to pay attention to the soil. And as you do, you will realize, aha, I can really grow some pomegranates here. And chances are, the seeds that you are holding match the soil that you are holding. But when you are in a reactive state, you never get to a place of quietness and stillness and being enough to actually take those seeds and plant them in the soil, and then continue the process of nurturing that soil. So for today, I want you to begin to really take some moments to pay attention to your inner soil. And part of the temptation, as I mentioned, will be to begin to pay attention to this storm, to get caught up in the storm, and he said, she said, and this just complete inner turmoil. So begin for a moment to see that there's a storm coming by, and as you do, begin to sort of, and you can do this symbolically, to take your shoes off and to take your socks off, and to begin to feel the ground underneath you, and to realize that the ground underneath you, and you may go outside to do this, which is actually symbolically. For some of you, if you live by a beach, go by the sand. If you live by the desert, go to the desert. Maybe you live in a city, so maybe you go to a park. Maybe you do put your feet on an asphalt. Whatever it is, this is a symbolic process to really allow you to see who you truly are. Because the reason why many of us don't grow, because we refuse to see ourselves for who we truly are. We just allow the ego to tell us what we are, who we are, and what we are. So as you begin to pay attention to the world within you, past the storms and all that. And what you will see past the storm is that the sky is very clear and there is sunshine. Sunshine is light. Light is energy. So what you'll begin to find is the energy within you, and what you'll begin to find is that light within you. And that light will become literally a guiding light. Now this is the beginning process. So as you find this stillness and you truly get to the light, you will see literally the light. So begin to spend some time with this light. And as you do, and as the storm passes and you begin to spend more time with the light, symbolically speaking, the skies of your being will open up, and then the time will be right for you to plant the seeds. Thank you so much, and remember to get grounded both in your true self and the earth and the light and the pure self, and begin to really get to know your own soil. Begin to be.